just find a shot. Well, here's a bit here where she's doing the chili, and I go down here. So there's a shot of her cutting some chili. Now all I have to do is hit the source overwrite button, and what that'll do is it'll add the clip on top and match frame it to the clip in the timeline, and it created the cutaway for me. So now when she starts cutting,
yes,
they look amazing. See, she's cutting the chili, and it's just on the cutaway. So the nice thing about that is if I go back to the clip, I can pretty much just go down and look for anything that's interesting, like that. I can mark an in and out point on it. So the nice thing about that is if I go back, I just keep going down looking for anything interesting. There's something. That looks nice. Source overwrite. What else have we got? Anything interesting? Oh, there's something. So she's doing something there. Endpoint, I might scratch the endpoint a bit to see if I can get it there. And the out point. And then, whoops, I lost my endpoint. I screwed that up. Undo. There it is. And then source overwrite. So I can just keep dropping all the cutaways in. Then I can go to the next view and I can drop a bunch of cutaways for that and then do it again and layer them up. I've also got another feature in here. Say if you want a nice close-up there, I can go to the same shot and then match frame it, do an in, and I'll put a little bit of duration on it. I'll just go down a little bit and out. And I can do a close-up. Now what this does is lets me do a close-up of the same shot. And if I use the tools here, I've got a bunch of tools here for position, cropping, stabilization, all those tools are in there. Well, I can now move that shot in a little bit and zoom it slightly. And I've got a now a close-up.
I've reserved some of the prawn heads over here. I'm going to pop them into a hot pan and then...
And I've got, so this lets me go and shoot with a single camera and just go along and just go drop. I could have shown you on the timeline by putting in and out points, but there's actually a bug in that, so I shouldn't have even mentioned that. But you can match frame. I match frame to the clip and then just drop them from the clip because it actually works in a very similar way to how the source override does. It's trying to be intelligent. It's trying to do stuff, extra stuff for you. So unless you put an in and out point in, and then it goes, okay, what you're trying to do isn't what I want. You can do that, but the whole idea is to try and make it intelligent, so it does things fast for you. Now that's all nice. The problem is, again, we looked at the situation of editing, and the thing that really frustrates us is the bin. I mean, we've got all these clips, it's all chopped up and that's the way stuff. You could have hundreds or thousands of clips. In linear editing, we didn't have to worry about that. In linear editing, we had that's nice. In linear editing, we had a tape, and we could basically had all our shots on a tape. So she didn't have to do that once again, did she? So in linear editing, we lost that when we went to nonlinear editing. And the thing about nonlinear editing, the reason it was great is because it was instant. When you did an edit, it was instantaneous. With mechanical editing, you had to have multiple decks, and it was all slow because of the machines were slow. But we actually lost some stuff. What we lost was the fact that all our clips were on one tape. So what we've done is we've got a button called source tape, and when you click on it, it takes everything in your bin and puts it in one long list, one long bar. And now I can scroll up and down all my shots. And if I can go into the bin order and change the view, so I can change the sort order, and it'll rebuild the source tape for me. And I can go along here, so I can, say if I want to build an edit up, and this is good, this is multiple camera views of the same stuff, but say I wanted to do, I'd shot someone rebuilding a motorbike engine, and I've been shooting it all day, and they're finished, and I could have hundreds of shots as they were doing different bits. What I'll do is I'll delete everything. Oops. And you could do a source tape, and I can just go along here and say, okay, I want this bit, that bit, and add it. I want that bit, add it. And I'm just going along all my media here and just, I want that. And I just sort by timecode order. So I want that, and I just basically go along and find all the shots that I like. And again, because it's a source tape, this is where the scratch trimming is really important, because I can't get the shots quite accurately lined in and out points because it's over an hour of media. If I go down here, you can see there's literally an hour of media here. So, and that could get really built up because it gets everything in the bin and puts it in there. So what you can do is, this is where the scratch trimming is really good, because I can find exactly the spot I want. And then I can get that in there and I can drop it down in using that. So you can see how I can just build up a timeline of pieces. So it's very, very fast using that. And again, if I go to an edit point, I can now trim around the bottom here because I've got all the direct trimming, all the tools are here. I've got the, I can trim in, trim out. One thing I've also got, on the edit page, you've got to change tools if you want to slip. You don't have to do that in here. If I scroll over here, I've got this little slip tool, and I can slip directly in here. I can also move the edit points backwards and forwards. And while I'm doing that, I can also do it here. Move that out of the way. There's that. See, I'm able to do that here. And I can also do it up here. If you want really frame accurate trimming, then we actually have 3 simultaneous trim editors all live at the same time. And I can move up here and I can do the trimming here as well. And you get a frame count as you're moving it around. And I can trim there. You can see I've got all that control. And no matter where I'm trimming, it works. And I can even nudge. But you can see how fast the source tape lets me just throw down shots and just assemble something really fast. So you don't have to sort of throw everything in the timeline and chop it all up. The source tape lets you do it. And as I'm scrolling the source tape, it remembers where it is. You can move along, and it actually highlights the clips as I'm scrolling along. So you can see I've got that there. It's highlighting the clips for me as I'm going. So you can see there's a lot of tools here. And also the other thing is if I want to do some transitions, I can just click and I put a dissolve in, or I'll click and turn it off. There's this transition switching here. So I can turn off things on and off. And there's also a smooth cut transition here as well. So if you're doing an interview and you've got a bunch of jump cuts because you're presenting and you've had to chop a bit out, the smooth cuts in here, so you can just apply that and it actually blends out. These are dissimilar shots, so it looks wacky, but that might be cool if you want to do something crazy. And again, you can change all these durations here. So you've got all the, and you can see this will always fit the transition in here, so it'll multiply up the number of frames, but the adjustments are always frame accurate when you're adjusting. So you can see how powerful this can be, and I think it's really fast, and there's a bunch of more edit modes and things in there. And then when you want to deliver, all the pages in Davinci now have a delivery window, so you don't have to go to the deliver page, and you can upload to YouTube directly from the account. If you've got your account data, you can render out and directly upload, or it'll render out. So that's nice, but we felt we could go a little bit further. It's, I mean, as you can see, it's a bit like another edit culture. But then we thought there's kind of another edit culture that people haven't seen for a long time, and it's linear editing directly. And in linear editing, we used to have a keyboard. So if we can switch back to the slides on the screens. So we've developed a keyboard for Davinci Resolve. So this is really funny. It's all metal. It uses key switches from esports keyboards. It's got a beautiful controller on it with clutch. It's USB. But what it lets you do is it lets you operate the editor from, like, you know, when you're using a mouse, it's like you're only using one hand, but you can use both hands. You can have the left hand doing all the selection of edits. The right hand can be doing the clip location. So it's actually even faster again. It's almost like we joke and call it the third edit page, but it's a mechanical device. So we've got the standard QWERTY keyboard, but there is some enhancements that we've added. So it's almost Davinci's traditional keyboard with just a few tweaks on it. And then we have the right-hand side. You can see there's a beautiful search dial. And then you've got, above that, you've got 3 search modes. Then above that, you've got the source tape and the timeline, so you can switch between the two. The source tape becomes really important from the keyboard. In fact, I thought of the idea from the keyboard thinking, and then we realized that it's great in the UI. Oh, by the way, there's on the right-hand side, there's also a timecode entry keypad, so we've got cool things like frame timecode switching, so you can type things in frame count versus timecode. A 00 button, so you don't have to type in 000, so that's great. Even all the key switches are rated for over 1 million hits. The clutch, it's funny, if you run the keyboard from USB 3.1, there's not actually enough power to run the clutch in the search dial. So we have a bunch of super caps in the keyboard that charge up to let you run the clutch, even if you're running a lower USB. But most things are USB-C these days. On the left-hand side is where you do all the transition control. So you can see how there's similarities with the transitions on the cut page and here. Because on a keyboard, you don't want to have to do 3-point editing to do a 3-point edit. You want to be able to put the in and out point on the source clip, but you don't want to have to go to the timeline and put another in point. That's slow. So that's why you've got Smart Insert. It goes, oh, that's the edit point you want. I think that's where you want it. I'll put it in there. And same thing, you know, with append to end. Well, that's easy. But the source override and some of these other functions close up, you just, you know, you run up and down the timeline and add them. That's why, if they can be intelligent, you can operate just again a bit faster. It's all about efficiency. We just keep measuring how long it takes to do things. How can you eliminate stuff you don't need to do? There's a nice big in and out button. There's some trim controls, and then below that is the transition switching. So what I'll do, and there's one there that we're seeing, you know, it's on the front of a desk. Looks fantastic with an iMac Pro. It's this, you know, just really fits together well. And it's got a lip around it, so you can actually inset it in the desk. So you can see you can have it perfectly flat in the desk because you can actually inset it. So I've got one under here. So I'll plug one in. I'll make some space for myself. And I'll show you quickly before we, then I've got one more thing after this, but so here's the keyboard. So these are prototypes, but you can see the color palette of the keys has been set up to be much more modern feeling. There's the search dial there. You can operate with your right hand on this side and your left hand on this side. So it's all metal, and there's also, it's going to be very repairable. we want to have, this has actually got a metal bumper on the front. The real one will actually be rubberized. We want to be able to replace that. Same with keycap sets. You know, this is designed to be long-term. People use it 12 hours a day, so we've also thought about repairability with it. Replacement key switches, keycap sets, all these sorts of parts we'll have available. But I'll plug it in and I'll show you quickly. It's a bit hard for you to see down there, but I'll show you how it works. So I've plugged it in, and what happened is the jog button came up. So now when I jog, so we'll go back to the UI, we can see the effects of the, there it is there. So you can see as I'm jogging and turning the knob, I've got jog, and on the left-hand button above the search, I've got shuttle, which is all very normal. But also on the right-hand side, I've got scroll, and scroll gives me the ability to scroll up and down the timeline instantaneously. So I can just move to any position I want, right up and down, just with a knob. And it's got dual bearings in the knob, so it spins really nicely. So even jog is actually quite fast. Sorry, the search dial, I've got to use the correct term. When you're in jog, you can spin it, and it really moves down the timeline. But scroll gives you that ability. Now I've got the timeline view or the source tape. I've got two buttons above the search dial there, and I can switch between them. And you can see I'm switching between the search dial and between the source tape and the timeline. Now I can use the scroll. So I've got an hour of media here, and I've just got down to the end of it. So say if we want to find a shot, on the left-hand side I can just mark in and mark out. One cool thing about the source tape is if I mark in and mark out on a portion of it like that, if I push source tape again, it now restricts the source tape to the area that I just had. So I can zoom in some ways on the source tape. So I don't have to have the source tape having the entire bin, I can actually narrow it down just by marking in and out point on the source tape. I can do that in the UI, but I can do it here as well. If I push escape, it goes back to the full source tape. So let's actually do something. So I've got, I'll go to my source tape. Let's find a shot that I want. So I can mark in there, mark out, append to end. Let's find something else. Mark in, mark out, append to end. Mark in, mark out, append to end. So let's just find shots, and as I'm just building stuff up, yeah, I like that, append to end. So you can see I can just run through and find shots. And you can really see how fast it is because both hands are operating at the same time. So this is even faster again. So it's pretty exciting. And if I push back to timeline, now I've got my timeline, I can just play whenever I want. Now if I wanted to do a trim of an edit, that's another issue that I want to be able to do. I want to be able to trim with the knob. So I've got a bunch of buttons on the bottom left-hand side called roll, and we'll have a keyboard out here after the show, you can check it out. But if I push roll in, so here's an edit point here. I'll go back to jog actually because it's getting a bit crazy. Where's my edit point? There it is. So I don't have to be exactly on it. If I push roll in, there's the in point of the destination clip. So I can do trimming right from there. If I push roll out, it's rolling the out point. If I now roll the transition point itself, and this is all modifying the behavior of the search dial. So now I've got this nice big dial just to dial these things in. And I can now also slip by pushing roll source and roll destination. I can slip the clips. And if I add a cut, down the bottom I've got the transition switching, which you saw in the UI. If I turn that on, I go to dissolve, and now I can change the length of that just by dialing it in. And then I can still move things around and do all that sort of stuff. Now what's really interesting about that, so if I go back to scrolling, if you had, say, a 30-second commercial that you did and you found it was 35 seconds, I'm thinking, I've got to get a little bit off it. What am I going to do? Well, what you might do is just do a whole lot of rapid trimming. So if you push the trim editor, which is on the keypad, what it does now is it switches into trim mode in an almost forceful way, and now you're scrolling up and down the edit points. So at any point, you can then go, okay, I want to trim a little bit off that. Let's go to the next edit point. Trim a bit off that. Yeah, that's pretty good. Trim off a bit off here. And I can just get that duration down. And there I am, and now I'm feeling better. And then I can just come back out of that. You can also do things like go to full screen and do all your editing from here. So you've got that. So you can see there's quite a lot of power in the keyboard. The big thing is you can do both hands at the same time. So I'm going to stop talking for a moment because Mary's going to pop over. There's a lot more stuff in Davinci, so she's going to do a really quick update, and then I'm going to have a little bit of camera news to show you. So I'll unplug my keyboard here and then let me pass over Mary.
Sounds good.
Sorry for talking too much.
Oh, please.
All right, I'll just get this down here.
Great. All right, we have a lot of exciting updates that we've added to DaVinci Resolve 16. In fact, it's such a massive update. I've got like 150 things to show in 5 minutes, so I had to kind of pare it down a little bit, just get some of the highlights for the different pages. Let me switch pages for just a moment. Okay. And we're going to leave the cut page for now. And I didn't realize how inefficient all of my editing and clicking was until I started working with the cut page, and then I realized just how much clicking I'm actually doing all the time. So this is our edit page that you're very familiar with. And what I'm going to show you is just a couple of big features that, and some things may seem really small, but if you're an editor, they can be a really big deal. For example, one of the first things is you can now create new timelines that can have custom settings within the same project. So you can change the format, you can have different frame rates and size within the same project. So that's huge. You can even change the frame rate and size within timelines that have already been made in your project, which is kind of big. So if you know what I'm talking about, it's kind of a good thing. I'm going to get out of that. Let me show you something else that's really cool. This is just, like I said, a standard timeline. I'm going to bring over an adjustment clip. This is something new. It's sort of like an adjustment layer, but it happens right here in the timeline on my edit page. And what I can do with this is I can place it over any clips. And once I do that, I can add effects to my adjustment clip, and anything below that, it will apply to whatever clips are below it. So for example, let's go down here through this awesome list of our effects. Let's go in here to our effects, and you might notice this nice list of resolve effects that now work in the edit page as well, not just the color page. And I'm going to come down here and throw on one of our new ones, the vignette, which a few people might have asked for. So there's our vignette effect, and I'm going to go over here to the inspector. As you can see, the vignette's now been applied to all of the clips below my adjustment clip, and I can come over here to my open effects and just make any changes I want to. Also, any of these parameters I can now automate or add keyframes not only here in the inspector, but I can also do those in the keyframe editor. So that's pretty awesome. So working with the open effects or the effects right here in the edit page is pretty big, and being able to keyframe those. So that's one thing. We've also got some really deep learning. We have our new Davinci neural engine, which is going to use some AI and some deep neural network. So it's like smart. It's AI, right? Everyone wants AI. Well, we've got that too. So, and ours is pretty smart. It's going to do all kinds of things to really make your job easier. Let me come over to some clips. One of the things we can do is we can grab a group of clips, and I can analyze those. And while I'm analyzing those, notice it'll go through and it will find the faces. So we have facial recognition. And so what that will do is it will go through, you can label your different characters, and it can actually make smart bins, which will automatically populate with those characters. So as you make more scenes, as you bring in more footage, you can just analyze them. It'll automatically do that for you. So
Attention exhibitors, the show floor will officially open in 15 minutes.
Awesome.
Once again, the show floor will officially open in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it'll recognize your characters. You could just give them a name. And once you do that, it'll have a smart bin that will go with those characters. You'll see those. I'm going to open up my sidebar, and you'll see, let me hide my effects for a second, and you'll see here's my smart bins. Notice I can just move those around. Here's my different people. There's my characters, and it will show you anyone that's already been analyzed. So that's just little things like that. You can also have smart bins for all types of metadata, your scenes, any of those types of things can be created into smart bins. We even have folders for smart bins now, so you can have smart bins maybe, or at least organized, so that's kind of cool. Let's step out of here. I want to show you actually one thing in my effects library is we also have put a lot of effort into improving the performance for Fusion. It's now working much faster in real time, and in fact we can add some of our Fusion titles right here. Let me grab one and I'll just throw it at the end just to give you a touch. Let me just pick one from the list and add it to the timeline, and here is a Fusion title that I can add. I can make an adjustment to it right here really quickly. Oops, if I could just spell. There you go, and there is my title. And so that's just one more thing that we can do right here, and this is just on the edit page, but there's more. Okay, let's go over to the color page for a minute, because a lot of that AI and our deep learning is going to be really put to work right here on the color page, and I know a lot of you are already familiar with what we had. Well, we've taken it up quite a bit, so let me just show you a few things that we have. For example, I'm going to switch timelines to my color timeline. As you can see, I have a bit of a grade that's already been applied to this. I'm going to go to a clip, and I'm going to show you one of our new effects. Now, this particular effect is, here's my scenario. I've got
Oh,
this
did it?
baseball scene. Let
Power
me
down, no one had the plug.
make it
Power in.
a little bit bigger for you. Hold on, there it is. And as you can see, we've got this character in the background. It turns out they had a script change, it happens, and it turns out they don't want to have that character in the background anymore. We need to get rid of them. So we now have object removal. And so what we can do with that is, I will just show you. Showing is better, right? So we'll come over here, and all you have to do is come over here and set a mask. I'm going to bring this up. And as you can see, I've created a mask. I did a little bit of that ahead of time and a little tracking, nothing complicated. And so my character has now been outlined. So anytime you add a window, you can automatically separate any of your object that you happen to draw the window over. So I've got that. Then I'm going to come over here to my, let's go over here. I'm going to show you now some of that brain power that's going on under the hood. You see this little red mark there. That's the neural engine at work, and what's happening here is it's actually looking at the pixels, it's analyzing that, it's checking out the background of the moving shot, and it's deciding which things to create a background once the characters move. So it's analyzing all of that for us so that when I turn this off, he is gone. Okay, let's look at that a little bigger, shall we? Okay, so now you see him, now you don't. Notice they're looking for him too. He disappeared, right? They're like, what? Where'd he go? So script changes, but there you go. So that is one of our really awesome effects. Again, that's our object removal. We have, you know, some of them are a little less showy, but we still have some really cool things going on. For example, same scene. Here we have a new shot. It happens where you have a shot, a pickup shot, that just came in however we got it, and they dropped it in, and of course it doesn't match anything else in my timeline. I need to fix it real quick. The colorist isn't here, and someone's coming to look at the timeline in about 5 minutes. So what do? Well, one of the nice things we can do is we can just select this clip, and I can come down here and take advantage of a cheat, yes, but it's a really awesome one, and that is our auto balance. We have now upgraded that as well, so it's using a lot of our AI to really think that through. So if I click the auto balance, you notice that it did a fairly nice grade, for me anyway. It did a nice grade, which looks great, except it has nothing to do with the coloring that I have on the rest of my shots. So if I wanted to, ideally what I'd like to do is find another shot that I can match this to. And so let me come over here, and I'm going to make a new serial node, and I'm going to find another shot that's in the same outdoors, in the same scene, and I'm just going to select that, right click, and I will just say shot match. And look at that, just like that. I'm close enough, right? I'm not a colorist, I'm just playing one on TV today. But as you can see, I was able to fake it well enough to get by with this particular thing. And obviously when the colorist comes, they'll redo all of that. But again, a lot of that work, you saw I just did that, it took me 2 seconds, and it worked out pretty well for me. So let's open this up, and I'm going to show you something you may not have noticed. Check out our scopes. You know, I know everyone's got their own favorites. Here's my parade, but you notice we now have our GPU accelerated scopes. So we have, right here you can see them in real time playback for our scopes, and we also have, you know, here's our waveform. We also have the ability to go in and change all kinds of settings too. So you can go in here and you can also look at different ways that you want to analyze it, and we even have a new scope built in right here. Here's our CIE 1931XY, so if you're getting into your color depth and you need to be able to look at it at this granular level, we have that as well. So you have your standard scopes, but we also have some other stuff accelerated, built right in. So all of this is pretty exciting, right? And then there's audio. I know everyone saves audio for last, but except me. All right, so let's go over here, and I just want to show you a couple of things that we have on our Fairlight page. If I go to the edit page for just a moment, you'll see that, you know, this is just a typical shot that we might have on the edit page where we had to do some ADR. The shot wasn't good, we needed to replace the audio, and the ADR, it sounded good enough in the studio, but now that we're trying to match it up, have you ever watched bad ADR, or it's good, but it always looks off just a little bit, you could see it? Well, I can tell right here, obviously, the waveform's not quite right. So one of the things we could do now is, let me pop over to the Fairlight page, is we now have something new, and in fact, let me just take this out, and I like changing things up a bit. There we go. So we can see this really well. There's his mouth, so I can really watch his mouth movements. And as you can see, these are pretty close just by looking at them, but that first waveform's not. So we're going to use our new elastic wave right here. If I turn that on, and now I have the ability to actually stretch, change, and move around this waveform to get it to match better to the lip movement. All you need to do is command click, you'll add your markers that you can then move around, and then I'm going to add a couple more here. This is the waveform I'm most interested in, so I'm going to stretch this out. Notice I can just stretch that out. Now, it doesn't change pitch. Obviously, if you stretch it too much, you'll hear that, but you should be able to just grab that and make a few adjustments. I'm going to try to line up those peaks, the consonant sounds there. Looks pretty good. And again, I could finesse this pretty well, but I think I've got it. And so now let's see how it sounds.
He didn't call for it.
All right, so it sounds pretty good. Now, if you wanted to hear the original, this was the original sound. Okay, which they didn't like. They wanted to replace it. And as you can see, we did a pretty good job matching the lips and fixing that up. So again, that's our elastic wave. You just right-click to turn it on, command-click to set your markers. So that's one thing. Now, we also have some huge power hits as far as elevation to our Fairlight page. And that is, we've got a lot of professional features that are now built in here that a lot of people have been asking for. It was just a matter of time. Here they are. Let me bring these up. I'm just going to glance at them because I know I'm going long here. So one of the things I know some people, anyone here work in audio, then you know that automation is kind of a big deal. So as you can see, I have some automation applied to my timeline here. And we don't actually need to hear the sound, so let me mute that. So we have some automation applied. We can even, of course, see this. So it's just standard, your automation. There's my nice automation curve. But what we can do now is we also have, in addition to automation, is we have the ability to preview, which if I turn on preview, notice it turns blue. That gives us the opportunity to then audition different changes that we might need to make to our faders during playback so that you don't lose control of everything because you have automation engaged. So if I turn that on, as long as I have something enabled, whatever's enabled, I can then turn this on. And notice it turns blue, so then I can make different adjustments to it even though it has automation. See how I froze it up? So I have manual adjustments. I can test drive it as much as I need to against playback, and then I can always drop in the new settings. So that's really great if you do a lot of automation. That's huge. We got a couple other things really quickly. Notice I have automation applied to a lot of my buses and mains, but I can't see those, so I can't do any kind of adjustments to them other than, I can listen and I can run the faders. But now we actually have bus tracks. If you go over to your index, any of your buses, submixes, auxiliaries, mains, you can come over here and I can just turn those on. So here's a VCA group. Let me turn on my effects and I'll turn on my main. And you notice that I can actually see, let's put up one more, I can see the automation curve now for those right there in the timeline. As you can see, there they are, so I can compare them. You can also cut, copy, and paste your automation from track to track. I can even go in here with my edit tool, and I can go in and I can actually redraw the wave, even though this is one of my buses. So I have total control of my automation, even at this level, which is pretty awesome. And that is right here on the Fairlight page. Another big one, and I'll show you this in a second. I'm going to just unveil this and bring up my meters, is we also have all new loudness meters. So anyone who, does anyone here do video? Anyone who does professional video, loudness is pretty much it, right? We have to be compliant with our loudness. So we have entirely rebuilt professional loudness meters now. So these are going to follow along with all of the loudness standards now. We have the most current loudness standards. And if you notice right here, you can choose the standard for your region. They're going to include your true peak now, as well as you're going to have 3 different colors that are going to show, if you do playback, you'll see 3 different colors. Blue means you are within range, right? If you're yellow, that's just going to show your tolerance, and red means you're too hot, you got to deal with it, right? So it's great that you can see those levels, but we actually took it a little bit further, and now if you look down at your main, while you have automation up, if you look at your main, you can actually turn on your loudness history. And this will actually show you your integrated loudness history right here in the timeline. So not only can you find out if your levels are off, but you can now target those and deal with them. So we have so much more in here. We even have, one last thing, I'll never stop, by the way. So just I have 1 second. The last thing is I was just going to show you we also have now our 3D capability. So we now can do our full 3D mixing and mastering, including our Atmos, and then we can bring up our panners, As you know, we have our 3D panners, which have been improved, and we even have our scopes so that we can work in a full 3D environment. So you can check out all that when you get out to the main floor. Thank you guys for your patience. I know I went long, so back to Grant.
No worries. Thanks, Mary. So if we can switch back to the slide. So the keyboard will be available in August for 995. A little bit early to show it, but we think we had to show it because it was really part of the edit page. We had to really show them together, but probably a little earlier than we would have liked to announce it. So the last thing I wanted to show quickly is the Pocket Camera has been doing very well for us. And one of the popular features is plugging in a flash drive externally. So people are plugging in phantom-powered mics, they're plugging in flash drives, and that's really hitting the battery pretty hard. Some of those flash drives consume a lot of power, and we have to provide a lot of power because we've got USB-C on the side. So we've come up with a battery adapter that lets us expend the battery. So all you need to do is the Pocket Camera is originally designed for this. There's a little switch there. You can take the door off, and in fact you can put the door in the tray under here. The battery adapter has a tray that slides out, and underneath you can store the, it's got two of the Sony batteries. And it's also on the sides, you can slide the batteries out when it's on a tripod. So all you need to do is bolt that into the bottom, it slides in, then it screws on, and then once it's attached it becomes part of the camera, and if I turn the camera on now it's providing power to the camera, which will power up in just a sec. There it is there. So it all becomes part of a unit, and then when you need to change batteries you can slide out, so you can bolt it onto the tripod. But I mean it'll power the camera for hours because it's a huge amount of power, but that's it there. I didn't put that on the bottom. So that's all we have, and this will be available, if we can bring up the availability, this will be about August, I think. We don't think it'll make July, I think it'll be probably into August. That's a really nasty fly. So that's all we have this year. Again, I want to thank everyone for your support. We really appreciate everyone's support. If it wasn't for you guys, we couldn't do all the things we do, and it's been a lot of fun, and everyone's worked really hard. So I'll let you get off, the show's about to open, but thanks a lot, and I hope to talk to you on the booth. Features with that. So the first product that I'll show is the new Hyperduck Extreme 8K HDR. So what we did is, there's a couple of reasons we built this product, but the big one obviously is going to 8K was a big thing. But we wanted a touchscreen Hyperdeck, and the Hyperdeck studio models we have now are only 1 rack unit. So they're nice and small, and that's really good, but they don't give you a lot of space to really do a lot of control panel based stuff. So there's a few things we wanted to do. One, obviously we wanted to have a really high-end recorder we could do 8K on, but we wanted a nice big touchscreen based Hyperdeck, but at the same time we could add traditional broadcast controls to it. Because the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to do archiving, and I feel like the archiving systems services have taken over around the world, but they're really not tapping into all this historical content that each country has, and each country's got its own culture. So we felt like we just needed to go a bit further and allow each country to kind of pull back its archive and get it easily into a modern file-based format, and that would give you the ability to get everyone's local culture onto these streaming services. So the control panel here, if you notice, it's very laid out, very similar to a broadcast deck, because we actually can control broadcast decks with this. So I'll go through some of the features because there is other technology jumps in this product as well. That's the unit itself, so it comes as a separate Hyperdeck and controller. You can see down here we've got the 2 Hyperdecks in 1 rack, or you can mount them with the controller. Having a bit of a problem here. You can see obviously it's 8K, so it does extremely high resolution, and it does all the way from SD all the way up through to 8K. The build out the console, if you had 2 5-bay consoles, if I go to the edit page, you can see there's a lot more on here. If I go to the cut page, it's a bit simpler. Now on the top left here is the bin, and I can click, and I've still got titles and transitions and effects. But I've also got some buttons. I don't need, it's designed to work on a smaller monitor. I don't actually have to go, I could actually do everything on the one page, because if often people that are cutting are doing it on set, they're doing a TV commercial, they actually want to do a quick cut on set and see how it looks. And so they're really actually doing it in small laptops and things. So we wanted a page that was able to handle that. So a lot of things we've done on here too, eliminate wasted space. So I can bring in the media directly from here. And if I go to desktop, there's my clips. I've got them in here, and it'll bring the folder structure in, but I can bring in clips in here. And as I move up and down, I can click and go between just with this menu. So I don't have that tab panel down the left-hand side, so I'm not wasting space. Also, I'll create a timeline to make sure I can do something. Now, if I go into